Oh, hi! I have here a list of top 10 writing rules from famous writers, and I'm gonna read them off, and I'm gonna address each one of them, and I'm gonna explain why you maybe shouldn't listen to everything that people say about writing rules, because writing is an art, and all art really is best when the rules are broken. Let's read off these writing rules. Number 10, this is from Stephen King. He says, write a draft, then let it rest. So, this isn't wrong because, yes, writing drafts are important, and making sure that you put some distance between yourself and the original draft is also important. But sometimes you will have a lot of passion for a certain subject, and then you will want to write about the subject. And when you do write about it, you shouldn't cut yourself off from writing more about it. Because if you do that, you are going to be losing your passion the more and more you wait for it. Write while you have passion to write about what you want to write about. And then eventually you're going to be able to get enough information to compile a second or third or fourth draft. And you really don't want to spend too many times rewriting your drafts. If you're at your 10th or 11th draft and it's not getting substantially better, then just take the best of those 11 drafts and use that. You don't have to keep rewriting it until it's perfect, because a lot of the times it'll never be perfect. Number 9 is here. It's also from Stephen King. He says, read a lot. Okay, Stephen King. Now look. 100% of people will tell you, if you want to be a good writer, you have to be a good reader. I'm going to be the only person in the world who tells you that's not super necessary. So, if you read a lot, you are going to produce a lot of the same stuff you read. If you read a lot of Stephen King, you're going to produce a lot of Stephen King-esque sort of stories. If you read a lot of Tolkien, you're going to produce a lot of similar fantasy stories. You'll pick and choose, you'll tweak a little bit, and you'll make something, very similar to what you've been reading already. If you keep your reading to not a minimum, but don't spend more time reading than you do writing. Because the more you read, the less creative your stuff will be. Now, I'm not saying don't read. Obviously, read lots. Make sure that you read a lot of different things, though. Not the same fantasy stories or the same action stories. If you want to write an action story, yeah, go ahead, read action stories, but also read some romance stories. You might feel, guilty about reading romance stories because they're like, ew, romance stories, but that might provide an interesting angle to your action story, So, yeah, Stephen King's right. He's Stephen King. Let's not question that guy, but you should not spend too much time reading, right? Spend more time writing than you do reading, because the way you learn to write is not by reading, it's by writing. And I don't know anyone in the world who agrees with this opinion, so just expressing that's kind of weird, but no, do not spend more time reading than you do writing. Number 8. This one is from my good friend, my personal friend, George Orwell. He says, never use a long word when a short one will do. I agree with this 99% of the time. George Orwell, he was a cool guy, right? If he, instead of saying something like, he was shot and the red lifeblood leaked out from the cadaver, he would just say, he got shot, he died. Just simple stuff. And that's the kind of writing that really makes, good writing very apparent. However, okay, so he said never, right? The thing about never, when it comes to a rule in writing, is never appropriate. I can think of 10 examples off the top of my head where a long word would do when a short one wouldn't do. We have Latinate words that are very long, and we have Germanic words that are very short. And English being kind of a mutt hybrid language, all these Latinate and German words are mating with each other disgustingly and producing these horrible offspring. But while you're trying to only pick the Germanic words and neglecting all the Latinate words, you're also neglecting the meaning of the Latinate words. Latinate words have different meaning than Germanic words, and they can convey different things. If you want to convey a character that uses superfluous words for no apparent reason, use the Latinate words. If you were trying to convey that the thoughts of a character are needlessly complex, you can use Latinate words. if you want to convey that a document is like needlessly complicated and uh, hard to understand, use Latinate words. There's thousands of reasons why you might want to use a long word instead of a short word. And that's mainly... Now, here's the thing. Do it intentionally, right? So don't just use the long words because they sound nicer. Use the long words because you want to convey something. Otherwise, 99% of the time, my man George Orwell is correct, and I would follow what he's saying. Ooh, okay, so number 7. Never use the passive voice when you can use the active voice. Again, George Orwell. I actually agree with that. Almost all the time you want to use the active voice because people don't communicate in like the past tense, people communicate in the right now tense. So you know what the passive voice is. I don't have to explain that to you. But like, is there a situation, can you think of a situation where you might want to use the passive voice instead of the active voice? That's a good question. I think there are. I think there are occasionally some situations where you might want to consider using the active voice. But again, just like Rule 8, only do it intentionally. Never just skip around and like don't actually think about why you're using the passive voice. Otherwise, always use the active voice, especially if you're a new writer. As a new writer, always just listen to these rules 100% of the time, and you will make above average stuff because most people aren't listening to these rules. They're just blurting out whatever they can. Number 6, know and understand your audience. Pierre Burden. All right, okay. I know I sound super contrary here, right? I'm just like, oh, all these rules, nah. But like this one's actually bad. Okay. Yes, know and understand your audience. Perfect rule. Great. However, you really shouldn't pigeonhole yourself into only writing for one audience. If you write for one audience very well, you'll do great. But you might not know who your audience is until they find you. So what I mean by that is, if you know that you want to write an action story, and for some reason, while you're writing this action story, you get a lot of fans that are really interested in your story, and that's great, but then you realize, oh my goodness, they're interested in the romance aspect of my action story. I threw that in as like an afterthought, but here I have 5,000 fans loving the romance aspect of my action story. So what do you do about that? Well, that's great. You capitalize on that, and now you start writing the romance and the action story. So yes, it's important to know that you are an action writer. But by not pigeonholing yourself into the action tree and like branching out and using a lot of different genres and conventions, you'll attract a lot of different people that way. And the more people you can attract, the better you'll be. You don't want to isolate people, right? Like Game of Thrones, people who don't like fantasy like Game of Thrones because it's gritty and realistic, but people who like fantasy like Game of Thrones because there's dragons and zombies and stuff. So by knowing and understanding your audience, yeah, you're appealing to those people, but you also want to keep your work broad enough so that a lot of different people can enjoy it. Okay, number 5, recycle and read the good stuff before you write. This is, again, my man, Pierre Burden. Yeah, recycle and read the good stuff before you write. Like, that's pretty self-explanatory. You don't want to have a bunch of fluff in your stories, right? No one wants to read about how your main character fed their cat. Okay, maybe we do, but like not 3 times. If you start off a chapter with someone feeding their cat, and then they feed their cat again, and then the 3rd chapter they feed their cat again, and you're not changing anything with that, like maybe the 4th time they feed their cat's dead. That's interesting. But like, don't make us read taff, right? Don't make us read boring the same old stuff, you know? I want you to really think about the good stuff. What parts of your story are best, and like appeal to that. Make sure that you are fleshing that out. If people like the drama of your story, play that up. If people like the comedy of your story, play that up. But again, not so much that you're being pigeonholed into that comedy or drama spectrum, unless you want to be pigeonholed in that spectrum, in which case, I can't stop you, but I wouldn't do that. All right, what's this 6th rule right here? So rule number 4. Honor the miraculousness of the ordinary. Andrew Morton. So what he's saying there is you have to make sure that you can describe mundane things miraculously. What does that mean? A lot of the times when you're going to be talking about a novel, you're going to be talking about a lot of mundane stuff. You're going to be talking about characters feeding their cats and waking up in the morning and showering and eating breakfast and eating lunch and eating dinner and going to work. And that stuff is boring. That's the kind of stuff people read a book to escape from. The thing is, you are still helping them escape from that stuff, even if you're describing the same stuff they go through on an everyday basis. The thing is, you are describing it differently. You are describing it in a way that is personal to the character. For example, the character just had a close friend get diagnosed with a terminal illness. Now, when they're in the shower, what are they thinking about in the shower? Interesting, miraculous. When they're feeding their cat, does the kibble of the, I don't know what cats eat, does the cat food smell like the hospital room? Does the workplace remind them of a slaughterhouse? I don't know. These things are very normal, but now, because you are an author and you have such interesting access to be able to communicate the thoughts of your character to the thoughts of your reader, you can make a totally different sort of thought process going on there. And with that thought process, make what seems to be very ordinary actually very miraculous. Rule number 3. Good copy equals draft minus 10%. Stephen King. I'm going to have to think about that for a while. Good copy equals draft minus 10%. Okay, so what Stephen King is saying here, this is very controversial, but I kind of like it. When you write your draft, 90% of it is good. Like 90% of it is the stuff you want to keep, minus 10% of taff, 10% of stuff you just want to throw away and replace with better writing. Now, I don't think he means, like, keep the spelling errors and stuff of your first draft. What I mean is, like, keep 90% of the original idea, all the plot points, hit all the plot points, and then take out the 10% of the plot points that don't really make sense, or, like, 10% of the characters that don't make sense, or 10% of, like, the world that doesn't make sense. Like, say you're world building, like, a fantasy world, and you're like, oh, I want to have zombie trees, and the zombie trees, I'll call them zombie trees, and they'll eat people. Maybe don't do that. I realize I literally have that in one of my stories. Fuck. Okay, don't worry about it. But, like, your draft is what you write when you're most passionate about your thing. And oftentimes when you're writing, the best things that you can write are the most passionate things that you're writing. So make sure you play that up. Like, find your passion, take what's you're passionate about, and then that original kernel of creativity, just get rid of the spelling mistakes, get rid of the bad characters, get rid of the bad plot points, and filter in some good stuff. Finish up your story, wrap it up in a nice bow, get it out there. Do not spend 15 years on a novel, because there's no point. There's no point in doing that. Don't even bother. Stephen King, he's a cool guy. I like him. I like this Stephen King dude. All right. Rule number 2. We're almost done. Bear with me. Look at every word in a sentence and decide if they are really needed. If not, kill them. Be ruthless. Bob Cooper. All right, Bob Cooper. He's actually just saying a really old adage of writing, which is, if you have a word that's not needed, kill it. Get rid of it. And he's right. Like, look at your recent stories. How many times do you use the word really, or extremely, or very, or an adverb? Like, it was a sunny day outside. That entire sentence, you don't need it. Just say, the sun was shining as Rebecca Cooper stepped out of her car and looked at the asphalt, right? Like, now I know the sun is shining based off of the sun was shining as, instead of, it was a sunny day outside. Like, that's too many words. Just kill the sentence. Replace it. Always, 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 always. I say always, even though I just said that writing rules shouldn't be followed all the time, and I'm contradicting myself. Whatever. Almost always kill the words in a sentence if you don't want them in a sentence. Or even if you do want them in a sentence, once you write it down, you are not going to want to delete your words because they're precious to you. They're your word baby, and you don't want to kill your word baby. That would be infanticide. No, kill your word baby. I don't care. Just get it out there. Throw it out the window. Okay, I'm going to stop the infanticide analogies. Look, the important thing is make sure you are not making us read random taff that doesn't contribute anything to the story. Everything, every word, every sentence, every chapter, every paragraph, every character, every plot point should contribute to the story. If it doesn't, kill it. Bob Cooper. I agree with you, Bob Cooper. You're a cool guy. All right, number 1. I'm excited for this one. This one's from Al Kennedy. I don't know who that is, but he sounds important. Rule number 1. Remember, writing doesn't love you. It doesn't care. Nevertheless, it can behave with remarkable generosity. Speak well of it, encourage others, pass it on. Wow, that's really poignant, Al Kennedy. So, okay, let's break this down. Writing doesn't love you. No, it doesn't love you. No matter how much you love writing, if you try to love, you might still be shit at it. And that's fine. Lots of people are shit at a lot of things. You can get better at it, sure, but it might be better just to say, you know what, I'm not a writer. Maybe I'll get a ghostwriter to do this for me. Maybe I'll get one of my friends to do this for me. Maybe, you know what, I don't even need to write. Maybe I'm more of a artist. Maybe I'll draw something. Maybe I'll draw some book covers for that Greg Guevara guy. Nevertheless, it can behave with remarkable generosity, speak well of it, encourage others, pass it on. Don't encourage others. Don't encourage other writers. Do you know why? There are too many writers in the world. That's right. No, I'm being controversial needlessly here. Yes, encourage people. You have a lot of competition as a writer, and by encouraging other writers, you are getting more competition. Because what if they're good? Oh no, but that's fine. Like if your friend writer becomes more successful than you, just eat your jealousy, swallow your jealousy, and be like, oh, that's really nice. Thank you, other writer. I really appreciate that. Yeah, Al Kennedy, he's right. I think like. You should, if you learn something about writing, that's what I'm doing right now. If you have knowledge about writing, pass it on to other people, right? Even if they don't like you. Even if they think that you're a terrible person. Even if, I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. Okay. Writing doesn't love you. Doesn't care. But it can behave with remarkable generosity. Yes. Yes, Al Kennedy. You got it. You got it, Kennedy. He was likely assassinated after he wrote that. That's all I've got to say about those 10 writing rules, actually. Remember, take rules of writing with a grain of salt. Don't go out of your way to follow these rules when you know that in your heart you shouldn't follow the rules. And make sure that if you are going to write well. Because if you don't, then you're just terrible. Bye.